G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to War Thunder. Today we're going to be talking about a fairly serious topic. This has sort of been plaguing the lower tiers of jets, being 8.7 to 9.7 over the past couple of patches, and it's honestly started to get a little bit on my nerves, which is why we're talking about it here today. Recently, we've noticed a rather sharp increase in the potency of missiles around this sort of battle rating. We've noticed that these sort of missiles have been going to lower and lower battle ratings as time goes by. Originally at 1.85, with the introduction of the supersonic jets and air-to-air missiles, we had AIM-9Bs and R3Ss. These particular missiles were pretty shit, and they were really only used for basically distracting targets, making them turn so that you could get your guns on. And to me, that was really interesting. That added a new layer of depth to War Thunder's gameplay. Instead of just sort of running away all the time, now you could actually combat those people that were a little bit faster than you, but you could also deal with these opponents that were chasing you fairly well because the planes turned and the planes had fairly decent performance to match their missiles. As we got along, we were given AIM-9Es and R13Ms, and eventually we were given SRAMs, AIM-9Gs, AIM-9Ds, AIM-9Js, R60s, and of course SRAMs and the like. Now we have AIM-7s and R3Rs, so, it's only up and up from there, right? Well, these particular missiles that recently have been added over the last year have been slowly going down and down, and I mean down and down in battle rating. Not on the particular planes, of course. The planes have been going slightly up in battle rating, but they have added newer and newer planes with more modern missiles. The AIM-9G is now as low as 9.3. The AIM-9G is about equivalent to the about the AIM-9D, roughly. Now, the AIM-9D originally was only on the 10.3 FGR2, which is now, I believe, 10.7. So you have basically a 10.3 level missile at 9.3, which is a whole battle rating lower. The R60 was in the same spot at 10.3, and now is put on the 9.3 Yak-38 and Yak-38M. The SRAM is a little bit of a different story, but we'll talk about that later. And of course the AIM-9J is at 9.3 and used to be at the 10.3 Phantoms, which are now 10.7. So what do we have here? This is a classic case of power creep, and power creep only leads to more and more frustration and more basic compression, if you will, of the battle ratings in terms of the matchmaker's capability to assign a decent match to each particular battle rating and each particular vehicle's capabilities. Now, these particular vehicles that have been assigned these missiles, the AIM-9Js, are a good example. The AIM-9Gs and the R60s are the ones that I'm going to go off first, though. These particular planes that are given them, the Harrier and the Yak-38, are actually pretty shit planes. They're actually pretty shit platforms. So if you didn't give them any missiles at all, they would perform extremely poorly, and that's because they have poor energy retention in a turn. They have fairly okay climb rates. I mean, the Harrier has a pretty good climb rate, but the Yak-38 has a pretty dog shit climb rate. The planes themselves don't exactly perform very well. Their energy retention in a turn is really bad, and if you were to basically not give them any missiles, they would be pretty crap. Now, Gaijin has given them more powerful missiles in order to compensate for that. Now, this has only resulted in them being more powerful at a lower battle rating. And that lower battle rating creeps down all the way to 8.3. So if you're in a Yak 30, say, if you're in a Yak 23, which I believe is 8.3 now, if you're in a Cougar or an F9F Panther, you're going to see R60s in a thing that doesn't even exceed 1,000 kilometers per hour. How are you expected to dodge that? I have no bloody clue. All the best. I wish you all the best luck, because you are going to need every little bit of it. Hopefully you can find some clouds somewhere to cower under, and maybe you'll get away. But apart from that, it's pretty slim pickings. You're not going to have much of a chance. And to me, that is really, really annoying. Having this sort of level of power creep is just too much. There's just way too much viability in the weapon systems and not enough in the plane for the plane to be balanced. You can't balance shit performance with extremely good guns. We've already seen this with particular planes that have really high levels of forward-facing armament but have kind of meh performance. Now, before they fixed up the flight model of the Do 335 and gave it an airspawn, it was pretty dog shit. Its only thing that it could do was go head on. And even before the Heinkel 219 got its own airspawn, it was also pretty dog shit as well. It had to take off from the runway, could only get to like 3 kilometers altitude, and by that time it was being basically dived upon by P-47s and Spitfires. There was nothing you could do. But having the ability to, do something else, maybe getting an advantage of some sort, gives it a little bit of a breather. Gives it an opportunity to sort of spread its wings a bit more. And that's what Gaijin have attempted to do here by power creeping the shit out of the lower battle ratings. However, this has kind of backfired, because missiles don't work exactly the same way as an altitude advantage does in props. These particular missiles are inescapable. There's nothing you can do to counter them reasonably. I guess you can turn your engine off, but realistically, what effect is that going to have that's reasonable? And I think Gaijin have taken what they see as the most reasonable approach, but it is just poorly thought out. It isn't a well thought out solution, and now they've gotten themselves into a little bit of a pickle, especially with the SRAMs. Now, the SRAMs are really crap for supersonic combat, because they only have a 2 kilometer range, and that's 2 kilometers when the plane is stationary. So if you go to fire from point A to point B, if that point is longer than 2 kilometers, and you will get that when you end up sort of traveling along at supersonic speeds, you will easily outrun an SRAM. However, subsonic combat is where it gets interesting, because the plane itself, the Harrier platform, whilst not being terribly good, still is fast enough, especially in a dive, to basically collect as many kills as it wants, and it's got the climb rate to do so as well. So you can do this sort of weird boom and zoom type maneuver where you basically have total impunity over things like a MiG-15 BIS. Now, in the Hunter F6, you could kind of do that, but you don't have the climb rate, so you can't actually boom and zoom, and of course you compress very, very heavily around the 800 to 900 kilometer range. So you actually don't have that opportunity, and you have to wait for someone to turn in front of you unless you use your guns or unless you're working with a team. And that's what makes the SRAMs balance on the Hunter F6. However, on the GR1, you don't have that sort of inability to climb. In fact, you have such a good climb rate that you can even toss and turn, or tussle rather, with those sort of higher level fighters, those supersonics that are climbing and are still at sort of low speeds. Now in the background you're going to be seeing some A7D footage, and the A7D was sort of used to compensate for that, if you will, to provide a hard counter. And what this has just done is this has further made these planes that have AIM-9Bs, planes that have no missiles at all, has made them further useless. And as a result, you'll see these planes likely go down in battle rating. Things like the CL-13B, things that don't have guns, like the CL-13A that don't actually belong at 9.0. We've already seen it with things like the T2. I think the T2 should have gotten AIM-9Gs or AIM-9Js and been left at 10.3, but unfortunately we're in a situation where it just got down-tiered. I think there was a better solution for that one, but that's just an example of that sort of level of power creep that I'm talking about, that, comes with battle rating decompression. And I know I've said this a million times, but we need more battle rating decompression as of this point. There are just too many of these power-crept planes that you could potentially take the missiles from, but that would make them too useless. So for example, if you took the AV-8A's missiles from them, it would be useless. Maybe it could go with AIM-9Es, that could potentially be a good solution, but I think the best bet is to keep them with the AIM-9Gs and throw them at 10.0, and then move the MiG-21 BIS and the F4E and that little sort of like friends and family, if you will, all the way up to 11.0. I think we need an 11.0 now, and I think it's about time. Even with tanks, you could do it. With helicopters, you could easily do it. KA-50 is just, and the KA-52 are just sort of way too strong. The Apaches don't really have that sort of issue. I would say maybe the Eurocopter Tiger from the Germans with the fire and forget Pass 3s could potentially be there as well. But of course, the most important thing here is the aircraft, because of course you guys come here for the aircraft. The GR1, I think, should either have its SRAMs completely removed and remain at 9.7, or should have its SRAMs but at 10.0. That way, at least it has hard counters against it, which is the primary reason why when the Lightning got down tier to 9.7, I was against that, and then when the MiG-21F got down tier to 9.7, I was less against that because there is at least some hard counter to counter the Lightning at 9.7. And now that there is basically nothing to hard counter the Harrier GR1 and the SRAMs, I think 10.0 is a good battle rating for it. And in fact, I think 10.0 should be the minimum battle rating for anything with SRAMs at all, because the SRAMs are just such a good platform given the plane. In fact, they make a plane that is otherwise really dog shit really good. And for me, if a weapon system can turn a plane around like that, it does not belong at a battle rating where it sees subsonics every single match. It needs to see something that can actually counter it and can actually deal with it in a way that the Harrier has to modify its technique. And for me, that is where the important changes need to happen. Gaijin can't just go along and further power creep this sort of battle rating, adding AIM-9Js to every single plane at the battle rating. You can't just do that, because then it ruins everything below it. Imagine being a MiG-15 BIS and having to deal with an SRAM. In fact, you don't need to. Go and fly it right now. Go and fly it right now and you'll have to deal with AIM-9Js. In fact, you saw in my previous video on the A7D exactly that. I managed to get a MiG-17 and a MiG-15 BIS. Granted, they were not, they probably weren't watching, or they didn't have me spotted, but that's beside the point. The fact is that the planes have to deal with them. It's not a fair and balanced battle rating. In fact, it's not fair and balanced gameplay at all that something like a G91R has to face an SRAM. It can't even outrun the damn Harrier. How's it going to face that? How's it going to face an R60? It's beyond reason. And so you need to you sort of advocate, or you need to consider applying a change, because these particular things are just so out there and broken. For me, I find it particularly disgusting that these planes are premiums and that they haven't been addressed any time sooner. The fact that you can literally pick up free SRAMs for clubbing sort of supersonic or subsonics, I find absolutely disgusting. And at least with the Hunter FGA-9, you had the AIM-9Es, which were okay, but they weren't foolproof. The AIM-9Es were pretty good, and in fact they have some sort of weird locking thing where if you lock a plane and it suddenly turns head on, you still sort of maintain that lock mostly if the plane's slow enough. That particular missile, even with that, is not as amazing as the SRAM, and as the AIM-9G, and of course as the R60 and the AIM-9J. To me, I find it absolutely abhorrent that those particular planes are on sale for some absolute random to literally download the game, put in $55 or $60 or however much it is, and just go in and without any skill, without any prior knowledge, get kills. And of course, it's not fun for those who actually do play the plane and realize that the flight model is absolute dog shit. So, not in terms of the workmanship of the flight model, of course. I am referring to the way the plane flies. It does handle like a bus, and it should be a gimmick. But unfortunately, it is a meta setter, and it is a premium, and to me, that's ridiculous. That's nothing short of absolutely ridiculous. I think, ideally, there should be a hard counter in the regular tree to everything that is a premium, and it should all be within reason. I think the A7D should have its AIM-9Js removed, and it should be put up to 9.7. It is perfectly capable of dealing with the Harriers, even with AIM-9Es, and it is also perfectly capable of dealing with the 30mm GAU 13As, and that 20mm, I believe it's an M61, or a Vulcan cannon. It has plenty of firepower at its disposal. It has enough performance at its disposal, yet it still retains its missiles that it will fight Yak 30s and Yak 23s with. To me, this just doesn't make sense. This needs to change, and in fact there are a few things in War Thunder that need to change, so if you would like me to talk about those before the end of the year, maybe for 2021, some things that Gaijin could improve on, then definitely let me know in the comments. I would be more than happy to talk to you, or to make a video about it rather. As for every other things, I did have some plans, unfortunately, for a sort of collaboration video with a bunch of content creators. just because I've had some computer problems. I now have my 32 gigs of RAM, by the way. It's fantastic. So far, no problems, but we'll have to see. Anyway, that has basically put on hold, that and a family holiday has put on hold a fair bit of collaboration work, and I don't think I'll be able to pump that video out in time for Christmas. I think I might do something else instead. We'll see how we go. But as for the video on what gadget can improve, do let me know in the comment section. That is really important. And of course, take care, and I'll catch you next time.